The song talked about not wanting to be blown away and the wind rocking our boat. And I'm reminded of a time when I was a kid, a little kid, and my Uncle John had a little sunfish, which is about a 6-foot sailboat. And being the wise man that he is, he knew he needed to do something to keep our little butts still while we're out on the lake, or he wouldn't be safe coming back and saying hello to my mother again. So he told me my job was to be ballast, which meant I sat in the bottom of the boat and kept it from getting blown away. That kind of steadiness, that kind of thing that keeps us from getting tipped over, for me, is the presence of the divine. It allows the wind to be used rather than batting me about all over the place, which to me, in this metaphor, the wind would be the law of cause and effect, which is always working. And then this sense of weight, this sense of solidness is what allows us to use it instead of it just making a mess out of us. None of which was in my talk. But that's what happens when you are thinking mindfully, when you're paying attention to what you're paying attention to. And since last week I skipped ahead to mindful action for Father's Day, this week we're going to go back out and catch up with our mindful thinking. So it's actually very appropriate that we did it that way, or that I did it that way, because last week I was on retreat. This retreat to me is where I purposely let myself get blown a little off track so I can know where Spirit wants me to be paying attention. I turn off my phone, and thank you so much for your patience with my turned off phone. I turned off Facebook, and I turned off Netflix, and I turned off all of that stuff just to go within and listen to what I've been saying to myself. Jan Lavedzent talks about being all alone in your head without adult supervision. And that's what I realized I'd been doing. So I got to tell you guys, it's like Facebook up in there. And I can't, there's no Snopes mentally. But there is the ability to sit there and find what is true and sift through it all and decide what works and what no longer works. Stuff that used to work for me no longer does. And so there was a decluttering going on that happened during my retreat that had everything to do with mindful thinking. You know, it's funny, if you go out into or within, what you'll find is that the world is not the one you think you're living in. The world is a different place. And we've certainly been shaken up enough in the last few months, last 4 months or so now, that I'm sure people are looking at the world with new eyes. So I want to do a little mental game with that this morning, and I am going to push buttons I have never pushed before. That's okay. And I can't see, but I think that's F11. Nope. Where's F11? Anyway, this is a map of the world. This is the map of the world that I was raised with. And why is it not working? There we go. Anyway, this is a map of the world. This is what's called the Mercator map, or the Mercator projection. Does anyone see the problem with this right now? Yeah, I know. The world is round. No matter what we might be told, the world is absolutely round, and this is flat, which means it's a little distorted. It's what we can work with. It's not a bad map. But you might notice that if you look for the equator, it's actually all the way down here. I thought the equator was the middle, so shouldn't it be further up here? And why is it that this map, which actually is usually moved over a little so that the Atlantic Ocean is more central, why is it that this map has Mexico, well, you can't see Alaska from here, but why is it that Greenland, which is way up here, and Africa it looks like Greenland is about half the size of Africa, but the truth is you can put 14 Greenlands onto this particular continent and it will fit. The problem is that it makes everything by the North and South Pole bigger because it's flattening it out. There's something else you should know. The original version of this map, the thing that gave us the little squares of latitude and longitude, was first published in 1569. The original name was in Latin, and I'm not even going to try because it's Renaissance Latin. But what it says is, or the title says, is New and More Complete Representation of the Terrestrial Globe Properly Adapted for Use in Navigation. This map was specifically created so that sailors, most of whom were coming out of Europe, could make it to what we then called the New World, which became known as North and South America, or down below Africa over to India. This is back in a time when the people making the maps were mostly white Christian men, and they were ordered by the upper class and funded by that. And so, of course, what it does is it places the parts that those sailors needed right in the middle. And at the time, it was very useful. It's not like they had Google Maps. It's not like they could, go up and have the Hubble take a picture as it leaves the galaxy of what it really looks like out there. So, here's what we need to remember. That's not the world we're living on. No matter how many times the flat earthers tell us, the world is actually round. The world is actually very different. And the way that was created back in the time it was created, it put all the emphasis on what Europeans needed. And without meaning to, without any kind of malice, what it did was it put the white countries, the ones that were more European or North American, actually, it put that in the center and it put it above the parts of the world where people are darker skinned, which creates kind of a creates kind of a mental thing that goes on in the back of our heads because we think of up or on top as better. We also think of bigger as better. There was a study done with children who had to estimate the size of a dime and a nickel, a quarter and a penny. And the poorer kids made all of the change bigger because, or at least made the nickels bigger, because for them, bigger was better. More money meant that the coin was bigger. And so they had a real problem with nickels and dimes. The world that they saw was not necessarily the world that you and I live in. The world that white Christian men back in 1569 lived in is not the world we have now. And so I just ask you to remember that the world you're looking at now may not be the world you have to live in. You can rearrange parts of it. You can right-size things like Greenland and Africa and your sense of how much good you can have. I promise you, how much good you can have is a lot more than you think it is. There's a book that I used to love by Orson Scott Card, and it's the movie that was made was Ender's Game. And in this series, it's actually a couple different series, there's a little boy named Ender, and he's living in a world where the Earth had been attacked, and they were waiting for the next attack that they knew was coming. They'd managed to fight off the first one, but they didn't think that they were ready for a second one. And so what the governments got together and did was pull kids together who seemed particularly adept, had a certain type of intelligence. And little Ender got sent out to a space station where he learned to play a war game on a video. It was like a virtual reality game. And even though he was smaller, even though he was being bullied, even though all these horrible things were happening to him, and he was just a little boy, he figured out something that everybody else missed and was able to win the games. See, apparently he didn't have a Mercator map, because he figured out that up is a word that means nothing in space. And so he was able to shift his focus and shift his ground and center, his center of gravity, in order to move in ways that the others couldn't figure out how. And that's why he ended up winning the game. Now, it goes on. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. I always think that the book is better than the movie, but that's just me. He didn't have the belief that said, you have to consider a certain way north. He had let that go. What if we let that go? What if we said, the South America and Africa are just as beautiful and good as Europe and North America? What if in our minds we took that map and looked at it upside down? It would still be just as accurate or inaccurate, and for all the same reasons. So I challenge you to take your mental world map and turn it upside down. Because what you'll learn if you do some mindful thinking is there's a lot of stuff up there that could really use some shaking loose. That could really use some looking at it differently. Jackson plays a song where the chorus is, it's not what you're looking at, it's what you're looking with. And so in that song, it talks about everybody else is stuck at a street light, but here I have a chance to meditate. Everybody else is having a bad day, and I choose to have a good one because I can choose what I focus on. Now, one of the challenges is that we get so stuck in our own world that we forget to look outside of it. We forget to turn the map upside down. And this is where it really helps that Spirit is conspiring for us. I'll never forget the first time I went to Utah, and something just seemed a little off. I couldn't figure out what it was. Everything just felt more open. And I finally figured out it was actually the streets. You see, our streets, in most cases, are still figured out as wide enough for the harnesses and a team of either oxen or horses, because that's what they used. And they wanted the cleared area to stay the same because it was easier for wagon wheels to go through a rut or one cleared space than to constantly be coming off and going on and moving around and falling into the ruts. For a long time, that's exactly how a single lane road was measured. As a matter of fact, we didn't widen it at all until we needed room for delivery trucks, which was in the 20th century. So we are set up to believe that that's how roads must be made. But the Mormons figured out, or I believe actually it was something that Joseph Smith ordered, was that all roads should be wide enough that a horse and carriage, or two horses and a carriage, should be able to pull a Yui in one street. I don't know if you've ever had to back up a horse and carriage. I understand it's challenging. So he said, just because everybody else is doing it this way, why don't we try something else? Why don't we, since we're putting in the roads and we're making them for us, why don't we make them to suit us now? So when I got to Utah, I was thrown out of my idea of this is how wide my road can be, and thrown into an idea of what if it was wider? What else could I do? How much more space could I take up? Isn't that a great metaphor? You know where I'm going with this, right? What if your road, the road that you're on, this golden road, doesn't have to be so narrow? What if there was space in your world to spread out a little and to maybe ease on down the road? Anybody else ever watch The Wiz? Maybe if we were easing on down the road and dancing our way down the road, life could be more joyful. We could fit more joy. We could fit more abundance and more peace and more power into our lives. And this is exactly what the science of mind teaches us how to do. I was looking for a quotation to use today and didn't find it, but found a whole bunch of other good stuff. And what I was reminded of, what I was brought back to, although the quotation I was looking for was about how challenging it is to control your own thoughts and how worth it is. What I got was reminded that it is not for us to go out and force the world to change. When a practitioner sits down with you, when a licensed practitioner sits with you, they're not seeing the you see in the mirror. What they're doing is choosing to see a higher truth about you. We choose to see a higher truth about our clients because that's actually the truth of them. And so while the client is sitting there telling me about how awful their life is and how they were born to be poor, what I'm seeing is the inheritor of the kingdom of the divine. I'm seeing a Christed being for whom all things are possible. We're seeing two different people in the same body. And so in the science of mind, what we teach is to slowly widen that road, slowly get into an idea that is bigger, and we can spend the rest of our life testing the limits. Sorry. Holmes says that so long as you're not hurting anybody, and so long as this is in, or what you're claiming in your life is kind of in a positive note, is pro-social instead of anti-social, go for it. There's nothing to stop you. There is no reason not to experience absolute joy, to experience love, to experience good that is beyond what anyone told you you were allowed to have. So what is yours to do is go within, just like I did last week. Go within and clean up the clutter that is still telling you that you have to be a certain age or a certain weight or a certain skin color or a certain gender expression or have a certain bank account in order to live happily. You don't have to wait for any of that stuff. You can have it now. You can choose that good, and once you start feeling it, once you start recognizing the higher truth about yourself, everything on the outside, which is actually all one thing, starts shifting to support your view. The control of our thoughts is challenging because what we're really doing is controlling our subconscious by using our fully conscious mind. And the thing is, we're receiving input all the time that kind of falls back into that subconscious mind, and it's kind of like the back of the closet. Heaven only knows what's back there. So what have you been putting in there? One of the reasons I turn off the TV and the phone and the Facebook while I am on retreat is so that I'm not purposely opening myself up to more mental junk food. I am cleansing my environment. So what the media has to say about you, what maybe your circle of friends and family have to say about you, we would all do well to take a good hard listen to what is being put into our subconsciouses. Letting the truth rise up that we are better than we thought we were, that there is more good in the universe than we thought there was, that we absolutely can and should take control of what's going in. Not because, there are things that are forbidden to us, but because it's sticking back there. It's hanging around, and after a while, it's kind of like fish and guess after 3 days. You kind of probably want to take a look at that. So here's the thing that I would throw a caveat on there. It's very important to recognize the difference between truly going within, truly hearing your thoughts, and truly up-leveling them and choosing to go through that sticky stuff in the back of your subconscious. There's a difference between that and what we call spiritual bypass. Spiritual bypass, most of you know that I'll describe it as, you know that old thing about who are the metaphysicians in hell, who are the religious scientists in hell. They're the ones in the corner going, I'm not here and it's not hot. I'm not here and it's not hot. That is spiritual bypass. That is pretending there is no evidence of wrong thinking because it's too scary or it's too uncomfortable or it's too whatever. When we see something that doesn't agree with our worldview, something happens called cognitive dissonance. I can't even say it anymore. Cognitive dissonance. This is that thing that's making you uncomfortable. It's that thing that's going, there's something off in this situation, and it doesn't fit my worldview. I invite you to sit with that. That is what I purposely set myself up to do when I go on retreats. And so that makes it sound like a horrible experience. It's not. But just because something isn't a problem for you does not mean it's not a problem either in the country or the world. I have not heard that anybody in our congregation has had the experience of COVID-19 or has it right now to the point of being hospitalized. That doesn't mean it's not happening in the world. There's a lot of racial unrest going on out there. And so what is ours to do is to sit and not pretend it's not happening, not pretend that everybody should sit down and be quiet and quit coming up with excuses to call in sick. It's as real as it needs to be out there. And what we can do is go within and change our thinking to call forth a greater experience of love, of power, and of peace. True peace, not just everybody who disagrees with me is now quiet, but true peace. Ernest Holmes wrote in the Science of Mind textbook, no man can demonstrate peace and cling to unhappiness. He can demonstrate resignation and call it peace, but it will not be peace. He also says that we would never be so cold-hearted as to tell someone who is experiencing illness to paraphrase, just get over it. We don't do that. That's cold. What we do is empathize without sympathizing. We join them in their reality to the degree that we can then understand what it is the belief system is. And then we speak a higher truth about them. Then we go back and remember that I don't have to heal this person at all. I've never healed anybody. What I've done is see them as they really are. See them as the true spiritual being that they are. And the practitioners do that, and I'm sure all of you have done it over and over and over again in your life. This is just a conscious way of talking about that thing that most of us do naturally, but if you do it consciously, it becomes more powerful. So we hold thoughts of real peace. We hold thoughts of real healing. We're not afraid to look into any situation. We're not afraid to allow the world to be its messy, chaotic, beautiful self. Because what we know is that within all that chaos is ultimate peace, is ultimate order. And then we call that forth into being by witnessing it. We do it in our own lives and we do it in the lives of everyone else. And so we do that through prayer. And so I invite you now to join me in prayer, whatever that looks like for you. I'm going to close my eyes and I invite you to do so too, only because it helps me focus internally rather than on what's going on out there. God is, and God is all that there is. There is a single power and presence in the universe, as every being in it, as every cell in every being. In the energy of life itself, there is only the God, the good, the power, the love that we, for want of a better word, call God. I know that I am one with it because there's nothing and no one else to be. I am an individualized expression of this one mind, one heart, one power. And I know that everyone else is too. Each of us unique and yet one at the same time. And so I speak my word on behalf of all beings everywhere, calling in the good that I want for myself and knowing that there's plenty to go around. Calling in a sense of utter trust in the divine, calling in a sense of the safety Spirit has as it looks out upon its creation. It is utterly safe to look chaos and unhappiness and illness in the face and acknowledge it, because then I get to look through it, beyond it, to the divine being that is still right there. I relax into the peace of knowing that this is what Spirit is, has always been, and will always be, and there is nothing else for me to do except witness. And by witnessing and by focusing my mind on that good, I call it forth into physical expression for everyone else, because the law swings in and just says, yes, this is all the law can say. I celebrate that all old ideas that no longer work simply fall away in the face of this higher truth. I rest in that with gratitude, with joy, and knowing that all is well. And so it is.